Hello, my warm-hearted friends, and welcome to the Botanical Biohacking Podcast. I want to talk to you a little bit about one of my main herbal mentors, Jin Zhao. Jin Zhao has come from a family of Chinese medicine doctors for 5 generations. He also has a background. His PhD is essentially in the study of different schools of Chinese medicine and the history. So he really understands the cultural context between how and why herbs were used at certain times in history. And that is really important because without that context, we may just copy without understanding the how and the why of what people were thinking. So Jin Zhao has been teaching students from all over the world, and people have been benefiting greatly. Today, I had the opportunity to talk with Yair David Danon, Israeli gentleman who practices in Tel Aviv. And I wanted to get his experiences working with Dr. Jin Zhao, as well as his work with Chinese Medicine Online, a Facebook group dedicated to students of Jin Zhao and serving to act as a bridge between different people's clinical experiences. And also they work with Jin Zhao's main apprentices in Chengdu, Chinese people who have been using his way of looking at things to enhance their own clinics. And their English is very good, so they're able to explain what's going on and how it's working. And I wanted to mention all of this in particular because in February, Dr. Jin Zhao is coming to San Diego via Chinese Medicine That Works. And the very lovely and sensual people at Chinese Medicine That Works, Joshua Swart and Matthew Reed, are going to be hosting him. So this is something I would really recommend not missing. I mean, some of my seminars, hit, miss, whatever. This one you don't want to miss. And you really do want to get this shift in perspective simply because it's not learning a whole big new system. It's like taking your understanding of tongue and just shifting it 10%, 15% for pulse, just a little bit here and there. And these little tweaks make a gigantic difference. Because instead of looking at all of these schools of Chinese medicine, these aspects of thought as competitive in your brain space, you get to the core of them and they become cooperative and smooth, and it allows you to proceed with clinical certainty. And this is the biggest gift that he gave me. And it's something that has been the foundation of every aspect of success in my career. And I'm incredibly thankful to him. So the opportunity to share this with everybody and just say, hey, check this out. It's an incredible honor to be able to do that. And I know that David feels the same way. So I'm very, very thankful for the opportunity to interview him and get his perspective on how working with Jin Zhao has affected his clinical experience. Hello, David.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Shalom. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you. How are you?
It's a beautiful day. So you have a practice there in Israel?
Yeah, I have a private clinic and I use a lot of herbs and very much inspired by Dr. Jin Zhao's work. And yeah.
Awesome. What would you say is the biggest difference in the way you viewed herbal medicine before and after working with him?
Well, what I aim for in my studies is for them to be very clinical. Like when I study something, I want it to be beneficial for my patients. And I think the main way to go with Chinese medicine and in general in life is to understand things very thoroughly. Like the more profoundly you can understand something, the more you can use it as a tool. And I think Dr. Jing Jiao really understands the essence of Chinese medicine and how things combine and influence the human body. And I think that's why I like so much studying with him, because first of all, I find him as a model. He's a very modest person and very smart, and I pick my teachers very thoroughly. Like it's very hard to find someone to be your teacher, and I have been crossing the sea, flying to China to study with him for 1 month every time. And I think it's mainly his understanding and trying to kind of understand Chinese medicine through his eyes, because I think he has it quite right. I see him as like a kind of a scale of reference to tune myself compared to how he does things. And I do see clinical results, so that's the main thing for me that shows it's correct.
What was something that you were doing before or a way of looking at herbal medicine that changed as a result of learning with him?
I think his approach is very gentle,
Mm.
also with using herbs, and it's because of his accuracy. Many years ago, Chinese medicine was the medicine that would treat everything in China. So people with very complicated issues, I don't know, like blood sepsis or stuff like that, would also be treated with Chinese medicine.
Hmm.
So many of the formulas can be very harsh, I think. And I think every classical formula, it's also something that he emphasizes on it. It shows some kind of principle. But after studying with him, I work very more gently with the herbs and try to be as accurate as possible. And he always kind of thinks of the earth element, like the spleen and stomach, when he writes a formula. And I really like this approach because it's very gentle and forgiving and like supporting the body, and not so much like there is a problem, let's fight it. It's more like encouraging the body's mechanisms to be more balanced, and by that get better health.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the takeaways that I had after, studying with him was I used to see cases and I would think, you know what, there's no way this is for Western medicine. It's time to refer. Like a physical blockage that requires surgery. No one
Hmm.
would question, okay, you need surgery to open this up. And, he would say, no, the herbs can melt the tissue. I was like, what? What are you talking about? And then I would see it would happen. Other times, maybe like severe thyroid disorder, tumors, things like this. I was really blown away by what I would consider very severe diseases that he was including in the herbal scope of practice. Did you also notice something similar?
Yeah, first of all, he really treats a very wide range of diseases. I think he puts emphasis on the differential diagnosis. Like he can use a formula like urchin tongue or a modification of it for a child that has maybe phlegm or someone with sinusitis, and he can use the same kind of formula for someone who suffers from cancer. Because again, I think once he pinpoints the thing that needs to be balanced, he just addresses that. He really does see a very big diversity of health issues in his clinic.
Did he show you anything that helped you to pinpoint the diagnosis faster? Was the diagnostic process for you slower before working with him?
Well, I think the diagnosis in the end is like it's kind of a eureka moment, because everything kind of comes together to a whole picture. If you have studied with him and you've been with clinic, you know how fast it goes there. Like he sees, like it can be 100, it can be more patients a day, so it's very quick, and he really does the diagnosis very fast. I feel when he's not secure about something, he will stop, even if there are many people waiting out there in the waiting room. You can see when something is not clear, he will take the time and he will stop and try and understand how the symptoms are all getting combined together to the diagnosis that he decides is the right approach. By studying with him, my picture of Chinese medicine became a little more clear, and by that, my diagnosis has become more accurate. And I would still say that I have a long way to go, because I think the diagnosis is, in the end, the full understanding of what you see in the patient in front of you. So,
Yeah, I understand. For me, it wasn't like, with a couple of exceptions, it wasn't like it was dramatically different. It was like, okay, here's everything in Chinese medicine that you already know, and then we're
mhm.
just going to nudge it 15% to make it so much more accurate. It was like
Hmm.
every little aspect, maybe looking at the tongue, just gets adjusted by 7%. The pulse, maybe another 7 to 10%. But then all of these, especially the way he asks questions is so pinpoint. That probably moved over another 20, 30%. And then the net result was this kind of cumulative effect of really streamlining and making it much easier. Now, a question I wanted to ask you is, in Sichuan, the weather, of course, is very damp. There is a lot of fungus in the air. In Israel, it's more arid. I'm assuming where you are, it's more arid compared to Sichuan.
Yeah.
How does that change your approach using formulas in China, which overall China is going to be, more humid compared to working in a more desert environment?
Yeah, well, actually, Israel is a very small country, but it does have kind of diverse climates.
Hmm.
I'm located in Tel Aviv, which is right on the shore, so it is quite damp here and hot. So it resembles a little bit of Chengdu, but this is a really interesting question because in Israel the stress levels are very high.
I can't
And
imagine why.
yeah, and I think it would even be interesting to diagnose like different patterns in different countries, also because of climate or stress levels or many different things. So that's an interesting thing by itself.
Hmm.
But again, when try to understand the way of thinking and not just imitate something that he does and copy paste it to your clinic, then it's different. And I think what's special about him is that he really tries to give a clear understanding of Chinese medicine. And once you understand it, you can really imply it on any different climate or other situation. And that's the big thing about him. That's what I really like about studying with him, is really putting emphasis on understanding what's going on with the patient. And it's not like, okay, these herbs, they can influence blood level of sugar, and these herbs can be beneficial for thyroid. It's not like that at all. It's really understanding what's the differential diagnosis with the patient, if it's qi deficiency, if it's cold blocking the way, or really understanding that. And then once the understanding is clear, it's no problem to apply it anywhere.
Yeah, it was one of my biggest takeaways with him is that it was almost like he was looking at the climate and the demographic and then zeroing in on that person's individual lifestyle. Especially when you're seeing 100 people, you're kind of assuming based on the weather, okay, everybody maybe is having some damp heat, and then taking that as a vantage point. So that's why I was asking about treating, because you're taking the principles and then applying it kind of, to the timing, the demographic, the people, the lifestyle, the increased stress, as you mentioned before. It's also, I think, reflective because his background is in, besides being a generation doctor, his PhD has to do with schools of medicine and the history of Chinese medicine. And so, there are times in Chinese history when people have been in states of war, under attack, and everybody's stress levels is high, like it is in Israel. And then other times maybe when, people are starving, or other times when people are very wealthy and overfed. So I think that probably taking that vantage point really informs his way of looking at it. And that's been one of the takeaways I've had as well. And I think it's interesting that you have also taken this perspective with you, back to Israel.
It's like a free talk, or everything is recorded or gonna show up in the. How does it work?
Yeah, whatever you want.
So when did you study with him, or how was it studying with him? Interesting for me to hear like from other students. And I think I also opened a Facebook group for people that studied with him and also want to continue studying. So I have some of his students teaching there. So maybe it will also interest you. Or
Yeah, that would be great. So for me, it was, let's see, 4 or 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And he's a classmate of my wife. So, I got an introduction. And actually, the first time I was there, he wasn't really teaching. At that time, he was working at the Chengdu Tongrentang, or Beijing
Mhm.
Tongrentang. So it was kind of a mafan, like a burden, like, oh God, I've got to babysit this guy for a few hours or whatever. But
Yeah.
at that time I had a weird job. I had this part-time job where I was working at night and my
Hmm.
pulse was really, really weird.
Hmm.
So I was with him and just, like not being in the way. And I took the guy's pulse and I said, the guy works nights, ask him if he works nights. And he was like, what? So he asked the guy and the guy was like, yeah, wow, that's great. So he kind of nodded and realized, well, he thought that I was only half dumb instead of completely dumb. So then after that, I started shadowing with him. And then, I wouldn't ask him questions during the time there, but maybe at lunch we would break or at dinner we would break. And then I would do that either 1 or 2 times a day, or, during other times when I had more free time, it would be more like every day.
I really think to study with him, like I really feel lucky to have the opportunity to study with him, and I really feel he understands it well. I really feel he has a good understanding of Chinese medicine. And I think many of the people that study with him, they really are influenced. And like I have had other different teachers, but I think for me, I would always like to be in touch with other students of his and to continue trying to understand the way he does things. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why I started doing this like webinars with his students from China that are following him for a few years and themselves they are Chinese medicine doctors. And yeah, I really feel like he's someone that's really worth studying as much as possible, and he's very generous with his knowledge, and
Hmm.
I really think he's a great character.
I also really love how it's not like he has some secret method that you found in the hidden misty mountains. There's a lot of, like, honestly, there's so many people who they say, oh, I went to China and everybody was garbage and I met this magical wizard who had this amazing secret system. I think the contrast with Jin Zhao is that he's a normal guy, and
Yeah.
he can just see, look, the commonalities between the different schools of thought, what their roots are, and just bring it all right down to earth. So then you can just you can use it and play with it, and it makes sense. And there's no mystery, and there's no need to kind of put him on a pedestal or worship him, because he's just the one who is taking it all, making it very easy for you to understand, and then it's like, here, do your thing with it. And for me, when I'm looking for a teacher, that's what I look for. If it's increasingly mysterious and you have to be someone's dedicated disciple for 50 years before they teach you something, it just sounds like they're incapable. But for him, he has no free time, right? So he's just like, here, figure this out, you've got it.
Yeah. And also another very important thing to put emphasis on is that he uses very common herbs.
Yeah.
Like in Israel, not every herb is legal, and I know in China there's many doctors that use all kinds of animal product herbs and herbs that are have some degree of poisonous qualities in them. And he really uses very common and very practical herbs that I can use in my country, because I have encountered doctors in China. They were using stuff that it was interesting, but it wasn't relevant.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you don't even need to have a gigantic herbal pharmacy. Some of his best work I've seen, he used, like Sanren, Urchen, as you mentioned before, Ermiao, some of these really simple herbal formulas, and then the Doyao, the herbal combinations with it, just to kind of enhance and then really focus on that root. So I think one of my markers for mastery, or the direction I want to go, is to be using very simple formulas for treating very complex diseases. I knew a woman from Israel, and she went to China, and she was using some kind of Mongolian mineral for her leukemia. And it was working actually okay, but it was this very esoteric form of Chinese Mongolian medicine. And she had to use this rare mineral, and then her supply ran out and she died. It sounds terrible, but you know what I mean? It's like, maybe people have some very esoteric system where they use snake venom, but again, it's not really that practical. It's not sustainable ultimately.
Yeah. I think that's the beauty of how he works, that it's very simple, elegant, and it brings clinical results.
What
There's
kind,
nothing too esoteric in his clinic that he uses or does.
are you treating more general diseases right now?
Well, the interesting thing is that before I met him, I was actually specializing in dermatological issues and gastric issues.
Mm-hmm.
And after I started studying with him, I understood that the real approach, as I see it now in Chinese medicine, is not to specialize in anything, because if you understand the chi mechanism in the patient, then the symptom is just a branch, and that's how he works, and actually that's how I work now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think, when it comes to specialization, that's more for marketing purposes or more for controlling maybe the demographic that comes in.
I agree.
But realistically, yeah, that was one of the aspects that he would say. It would be like, okay, this person has wind damp pain. And then he would turn to me and be like, you think I should add some Yenhu Suo? And I was like, yeah, why not? He's like, wrong. Just because it treats, quote, pain of all types doesn't mean it's appropriate. And the symptoms, are to be ignored almost to the point that you're just zeroing in on that root and then taking it out, and then everything alleviates. I used to also take a two-part approach where I would be like, okay, we're going to remove the damp, and then I'm going to get in and tonify the kidneys. And he was like, why? I was like, well, because I saw damp heat and kidney deficiency. He's like, no, you didn't. You saw damp heat. The damp will block the kidney. How do you know it's really deficient? I'm like, well, I don't know. He'd be like, watch. The kidneys get cleared up with something like Sanren Tang. Lungs are already open because of the Xingren. So, the lungs being open, the kidneys open, it tonifies by itself if there, even was a deficiency there. So it was a shift from my thinking before, which was more, maybe a lot of the Western TCM books in particular will be like, you have 5 patterns at once. We have to treat all of these patterns at once. Whereas the perspective I got from him is, if there are 5 diagnoses, you probably are wrong on 4 of them. Just find the right one and then treat it.
Yeah. It's like my learning experience with him, that I would be thinking in one direction and he will kind of ask why, and why do you think that? And he will change my perspective and my understanding. And that's the thing with him. He really makes you think. He's like, why do you think there's kidney deficiency? Why? Maybe it's just the dampness blocking. Or he really makes you understand all the small details in the situation. And that's what makes his treatment so accurate and so simple. That's what I like about it. But what you described really reminds me of how my interaction with him was.
Yeah, I think one of the deficiencies in the West, at least in like the US, Canada, Western European countries, is that people approach it, maybe they have kind of a new age background, and then they approach diagnosis as though there's no wrong answer. But when it comes to life and death and medicine, there definitely are wrong answers. And sometimes asking those questions is a very Socratic method that's nice. It's a gentle way of doing it. And at the same time, if you're not really poking at your thought process and prodding it and testing it, I think that's it's impossible for it to ever really get stronger unless you're questioning even your approach.
When I followed him around in clinic, there are many rooms of different doctors, and then there's a waiting room and the pharmacy right behind. So, in my impression, I didn't see anyone, like, he's very busy. He's very busy compared to other people. I didn't see many people see so many patients. And his students, his apprentices, are people that have been following him for a few years. He lectures in the university, so he always has like a few students like shadowing him, I guess you say.
Mm-hmm.
And I just try to pick the ones that speak good English and that have been following him for a few years and that have a good understanding and also work in their own clinics, or some of them are doing PhDs. And what happened in the beginning is I would have private lessons with these people just to keep on learning and trying to understand his way of thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided to open it up for more people because I think it's really beneficial for every it could be very beneficial for everyone's clinic. It's very practical. Like I really see better clinical results, and that's why I really want to learn as much as possible. And I opened this group and I just invited people and posted it. And these lessons are going to be they're happening every week. And yeah, I would be very happy if more people would like to join and study together. And like this conversation we're having, I think it's very important that there is communication between students and there's more questions, and then I can use your point of view or your understanding or your experiences you had with him to make my understanding better. And the more we are, the better it will be.
That's awesome. Yeah, sign me up. I'd also like to link it through with the botanical biohacking group because I know that there are people who, appreciate my work as simple as it is. And, I always point that anything beneficial or simple that's come from that has come from him. So there's quite a bit of interest in learning from him. So I'm sure there are people who will be very happy to hear more from you and from his other students as well.
And the main goal is that I want him to start lecturing one day, but it's once there'll be enough students and if he'll have some more free time because he's very loyal to his patients, then maybe we can get him to have a lesson every once in a while, and that will really be amazing for me. Like that's one of the main goals. And yeah, I really welcome everybody to join, and I think what he's doing is amazing, and I think it's in an early stage. He's very famous in China, but people don't realize yet how profound his work is. At least that's what I feel, and I really
Mm-hmm.
feel like I found something that I want to spread as much as possible because I think it will really be beneficial for many people.
Absolutely. I feel the same sense of gratitude and also, for my friends, hey, you got to check this out because, it's before for me, Chinese medicine was a bit of a struggle. And I
Hmm.
had teachers who would say, maybe they would ask one question and then say, well, you better follow me for longer. But it was a little bit more about me following them longer.
Hmm.
And, I would do tongue and pulse and I would spend 2 hours trying to figure out the perfect formula for somebody. And, I'd be wrong. And after studying with him, it was, I had clinical certainty. For the first time in my life, I could be like, not just with something obvious. Somebody comes in and it's textbook yin deficiency. And then maybe you give them textbook Jibai, and then you're lucky and it works out just perfectly and you feel great, right? But then that's an outlying case. Most people come in and it's a mixture, or it appears to be a mixture of different patterns. It's been chronic. There are signs of excess, signs of deficiency. And one of the aspects that I'm just forever thankful to him for is just helping me to make it really simple, to be like basically within within 2 questions, facial complexion, pulse a little bit, tongue, have absolute clinical certainty. Maybe the formula I'm using isn't perfect. Maybe it's only 80%. Maybe because it's only 80%, it will get them better in a week and a half instead of 1 week.
Hmm.
But at least I'm not wrong. And before I used to be wrong a lot. I have to admit, I used to be wrong a lot. Maybe I was right 60% of the time, right?
Yeah.
And then the patient would go with me for 3 weeks. Oh, okay, it's getting worse. And then we try something else and then it works. And I think that's a lot of people who are doing herbal medicine are still back where I was there. And I remember how frustrating that was and scary because you want to show up with confidence and clinical certainty. So the way I would get it back then was I would treat very, very, very simple diseases. And if it was complex, I would refer it out. And then as I became better with the diagnosis and had better context, and really just through these micro adjustments of the approach to thinking more than anything else, it wasn't like learning an entirely new diagnostic system. It wasn't that at all. It was just these micro adjustments. And after that, I would be like, I know I'm not wrong. I might not be 100% perfect as far as, my experience using the exact percentage of herbs, but it doesn't matter. As long as you're not wrong, you're getting them better. And that's something that, that feeling, having that feeling lifted of, I don't want to make this person worse. I want the relationship between the physician, patient to be increasing and feeling better. That was my experience anyway.
Yeah, I couldn't put it better. I think the clinical certainty is one of the things that's maybe the main thing. And that's what I think most of us practitioners are longing for. And I really feel the same, like what you described. I think that's one of the main things why I feel so good studying with him, because you have more clinical certainty. Yeah, I think it's a byproduct of understanding. You understand and you know you're going in the right direction. And, first of all, we just want to make sure we're making no harm. And when you have this clinical certainty, then you know you're in the right direction and you know it's going in a good way. It might not be 100% on the spot accurate, but it's the right direction. And I think that's one of the things that you really put it well. And that's what I feel as well.
And I think that really sets the stage too for having a prognosis. And this is something, you see a cardiologist and the cardiologist will say, you're going to feel this for 2 days, then you're going to feel this for 3 weeks, and then this is going to happen, and you're going to be on this medication for life. And then because of that prognosis, everyone's just fine with it. And then you go for Chinese medicine and, people say, okay, you tried this herbal formula. Oh, what can I expect? And the practitioner says, well, let's see, right?
Yeah.
If you're not really clinically certain that it's the right diagnosis and you don't have much experience with that, it's very, very hard unless you're used to being right. And one of the things I would love, I really enjoyed, was seeing him just say, you can expect to have loose stools for the first few days. Don't be alarmed. That's just the damp coming out. Then, your sense of thirst, you're going to feel really thirsty. Take it slow. Just drink, hot water, warm water. He's just telling people this is going to happen almost by the day and what to expect. And he just rattles it off. But immediately they feel so comfortable. So not only is the clinician very certain, but then the patient can feel very certain because by the day it's happening just like the doctor said it would. And I think this has a tremendous effect on compliance. Can you tell me a little bit about the online lessons you're doing?
So as I said, it's people that have been studying with Jin Zhao in China for a few years, and they have a good understanding of the way he thinks. And they've also been following certain patients he has for a few months, and then there's tongue photos that are changing through the treatment, and we try to make it as clinical as possible. So there are many case studies from his clinic with the herb prescriptions and how he changes them. And also there are some theoretical lessons, like next Sunday there's supposed to be a lesson about tongue diagnosis. And it usually also has a few case studies from his clinic as well. Yeah, it's a place where people can kind of tap into his way of thinking without flying all the way to China. And I think it's the future in many ways because tongue photos are getting better and better. The cameras on all the cell phones are getting quite good, and you can get really good tongue photos. Of course, the pulse is another issue, but there's a lot to study just from the case studies and from his students. And I really find it the best way for me when I'm far from him to continue studying and understanding and something that is more clinical and practical.
Awesome. So how can listeners find this online platform?
So actually, we have a group on Facebook which is called the Chinese Medicine Online,
Mm-hmm.
and every time there's a lesson, we publish it there, and people can join the lesson. And there's also a link where you can add your email, and whenever there's a lesson coming up, there'll be email sent. At the moment, the lessons are about 1 hour long. I think people are quite satisfied, and the more people join us, the better it will be. Yeah, I hope this community will grow, and I hope more and more people can be exposed to the way Dr. Jin Zhao works. I really
Awesome.
think it's a good opportunity. Yeah, yeah, I'm really excited about it. And the last talk I had with him, I was talking to him about maybe having a possibility of him teaching, and that's really something exciting for me because that would just be amazing to have him online as well.
I'm so happy you're doing this. I mean, first of all, definitely sign me up. I'm going to be getting those lessons as soon as possible. And, Lana and I have been talking to him for years about get a camera on you. Get a
Yeah,
camera on you while you're doing tongue and pulse. Get one while you're doing lectures. And he's like, oh, yeah, 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 I'll do that. But, he's
yeah,
busy with so much. So
yeah.
I can't thank you enough for doing this. This is something I felt like I should be doing for some time. Introduced him to a friend of mine at Josh Swart at Chinese Medicine That Works. They're doing a seminar together in February in
Hmm.
San Diego, and that is a small weight off my chest because I know that he'll be able to speak, and it will be a new audience of people in the United States. And I'm very, very thankful that now people who will be, especially people who will be attending the seminar, can continue and follow through or follow up with the lessons you're providing online. So I'm really ecstatic and excited that you're providing this opportunity for all of us.
Yeah, I'm also very happy about it, and I hope everybody will be excited as you and me are. Because once you get a taste of how he works, I think it's really something that you feel you want to be exposed to more people. And when something is true, you just want to tell everybody, like, there's something good here. You should join it. Like, that's what I feel about it. And I can feel the excitement from your voice as well. And I think when people get to know him, they will appreciate it. And I hope everybody will just see how beneficial this can be. And yeah, I'm really happy we had this talk because it's really nice to have more people that know him and are interested in this way. And I really want as many students of his to kind of come together and we can talk and learn from one another.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to sign up right now on Chinese Medicine Online if you'll have me. And, for those who are listening, please do the same. I promise you, you won't regret it. I used to carry every herbal formula I could get my hands on. You can just imagine how this clogged up shelf space and mental space. Plus, it gave me a lot to dust every week. We looked at our most effective products, our automatic top sellers, and found that they coincided with the most popular and effective herbal products in East Asia. We decided to focus on the winners and then make them even better. Our research team in Chengdu upgraded these formulas using the highest quality herbs on the planet and rigorously testing them at pharmaceutical standard for quality and safety. You'll want to get your hands on this, and you'll get your supplies at botanicalbiohacking.com. Thanks for listening to the Botanical Biohacking Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Miles.